Millionaire Sheikh tests them in Arabic. Only the maid's daughter answers, and everyone freezes. Sheikh Omar's mansion always looked perfect from the outside, golden lights shining on white marble walls. But inside the grand hall that night, something unusual was happening. A silence fell the moment Sheikh Omar entered, his cane tapping the floor with every step. His sharp eyes scanned the people gathered, wealthy businessmen, their wives, and a few servants standing quietly in the background. Nobody knew why. He had called them there, and that mystery made the air heavy. People whispered, curious and uneasy, as if something big was about to be revealed. "Tonight," Sheikh Omar said slowly, his deep voice echoing in the hall, "I want to know who among you respects the language of my ancestors." His words surprised everyone. He continued, "I will speak in Arabic, and I expect an answer." Murmurs spread through the guests. Most of them had lived in America for years and barely remembered a single word of Arabic. Some laughed nervously, others shifted in their seats, embarrassed. Omar raised his hand, and the room went quiet again. He began with a simple sentence in Arabic. The hall froze. No one answered. The men avoided his eyes. Their wives looked down at their hands. Even the servants looked confused. Sheikh Omar's face grew stern, disappointment spreading across his features. "Is there no one here," he asked, "who can understand me?" For a moment it seemed like the silence would last forever. But then from the very back of the room, a soft voice replied. Everyone turned. It was Emma, the young daughter of the maid who had worked in the mansion for years. Her dress was plain compared to the others, her hands nervously gripping the edge of her chair, but her words were clear and confident in Arabic. The hall gasped, all eyes fixed on her. Emma's mother covered her mouth, terrified that her daughter had spoken out of turn. One of the businessman's wives whispered, "Did she really just answer him?" Another muttered, "She's only the maid's daughter." Sheikh Omar leaned on his cane and stared at the girl. "What is your name?" he asked, switching back to English. "Emma," she said softly, her heart racing. His expression softened for the first time that evening. "Emma," he repeated, "you spoke with respect. Tell me, who taught you?" "My mother," Emma replied. "She wanted me to never forget where we came from." A ripple of unease spread across the room. Wealthy men who prided themselves on their power shifted uncomfortably, realizing they had been humbled by a young girl. The silence grew thick again, but this time it wasn't because of fear. It was because everyone knew something had changed. For a long moment after Emma spoke, the room remained heavy with silence. It wasn't the kind of silence that passed easily. It pressed on the guests like weight. Their eyes shifted from Sheikh Omar to the young girl who had dared to respond. Some of the women clutched their pearl necklaces, as if the world had just turned upside down. The men stared, some with disbelief, some with irritation. How could a maid's daughter succeed where they, with all their education and wealth, had failed? Sheikh Omar leaned back slightly in his chair, resting both hands on the carved handle of his cane. His dark eyes fixed on Emma, not with anger, but with a curiosity that made everyone more nervous. "You understand more than I expected," he said in Arabic again, his tone slower this time. "Tell me, child, do you only repeat what you memorized, or do you truly know the meaning of my words?" Emma's throat felt dry, but she swallowed and answered in Arabic, her accent careful, her voice trembling at first but growing steady with each word. She translated his sentence back to English with almost perfect precision. Gasps echoed once more, louder than before. Even Sheikh Omar's lips curved into something close to a smile, though it carried a sharp edge, as if he had been waiting for this moment. The businessman sitting nearest to Omar cleared his throat and forced a laugh. "Sheikh, with respect, she is just a girl. Surely you cannot take this seriously." His words dripped with condescension, but his nervous fingers betrayed his fear. He had failed the test, and the maid's daughter had succeeded. Omar turned his gaze toward the man, and the laughter died instantly. "It is not age or title that gives wisdom," he said firmly. "Sometimes truth lives in the voices we choose to ignore." Emma lowered her head, unsure if she should keep quiet now or wait for another question. She could feel her mother's fear from across the hall. Her mother, hands pressed together tightly, whispered a prayer under her breath. She had warned Emma countless times never to speak in front of the guests unless spoken to. But tonight had been different. Tonight, her silence had been impossible. "Come closer," Sheikh Omar said suddenly. The room reacted as if the floor had cracked beneath them. Emma's mother gasped audibly. Emma hesitated, then stood slowly, her legs trembling, and walked down the long carpet that stretched to the center of the hall. The guests whispered to each other in disbelief. The girl's plain shoes tapped softly against the marble floor, sounding louder with every step. When she reached him, Omar studied her closely. "You speak Arabic well. Do you also read it?" Emma nodded hesitantly. "A little." His cane tapped once against the marble as he gestured for one of his assistants. The man brought an old leather-bound book, its cover worn with time. Omar placed it gently on the table in front of him. "Read this," he ordered, pointing to a passage. Emma leaned forward, her heart hammering so loudly she feared it would drown out her voice. The letters looked familiar, some easier than others, but she forced herself to focus. Slowly, carefully, she began to read aloud. Her voice shook at first, but steadied as the words flowed. When she finished the sentence, the hall erupted in murmurs again. Omar's eyes glistened, just for a second, though his face remained stern. "Do you know what you have just read?" he asked softly. Emma nodded. "It says that wealth and honor belong to God alone, not to man, and that those who boast of riches are empty inside." The words struck the hall like thunder. Some guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others lowered their eyes, ashamed. The irony was sharp. The richest men in the room had failed, while the daughter of a servant had spoken the very words that stripped them of their pride. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. She wanted to rush forward, to hold her daughter's hand, but fear held her back. What if this test was dangerous? What if Omar's attention would bring more harm than good? One of the younger businessmen suddenly scoffed, trying to regain control of the room. "Sheikh, forgive me, but this is nonsense. She may know a few words, but she is no scholar. Why should any of us care about the opinion of a maid's daughter?" His arrogance echoed, but underneath, his jealousy was clear. Omar's cane struck the floor, the sharp sound silencing the room. "You dare dismiss her when none of you could even answer a single word." His voice rose, stronger now, filled with authority. "Do you think knowledge chooses the rich over the poor? Or that truth favors titles over humility?" The businessman paled, his lips trembling, but he dared not respond. Emma's small voice broke the silence. "I only spoke because I felt it would be wrong to stay quiet." Her words were simple, yet they pierced the room deeper than any argument. Omar studied her again, then looked at the rest of the room. "Perhaps tonight was never about a language test," he said slowly, almost to himself. "Perhaps it was about seeing who has the courage to speak when everyone else remains silent." The hall fell into a deeper silence now, not of shame, but of reflection. Some of the guests stared at the floor, others at the girl who stood trembling yet unbroken in front of them. Her presence had shifted something no wealth could buy, but just as the tension seemed to settle, an unexpected twist came. From the far end of the room, one of Omar's oldest advisors stepped forward, his face drawn with concern. "Sheikh," he said in Arabic, his voice grave, "there is something you must know about this child." All heads turned toward him. Emma's heart raced. Her mother's breath caught in her throat. The advisor hesitated, glancing at Omar, then at Emma, then back at the guests. "This girl," he paused, his voice heavy, is not who everyone believes her to be. Gasps filled the hall. Emma's mother shook her head, her lips trembling as if she wanted to deny something but could not find the words. Omar's expression darkened, curiosity turning into something sharper, deeper. "What do you mean?" he demanded. The advisor lowered his voice, but in the silence of the hall, every word was heard clearly. "She is not only the maid's daughter, there is more to her bloodline than anyone here knows." Emma froze, her mind spinning, her mother covering her mouth as tears rolled down her cheeks. The guests leaned forward, shocked, waiting to hear the secret that had just begun to unravel, and Omar, gripping his cane tightly, stared at Emma with an intensity that made her tremble. "Then tell us," he ordered. "Who is she really?" The advisor's words hung in the air, trembling on the edge of revelation. The hall seemed to shrink as the advisor's words echoed. The chandeliers above flickered gently, casting long shadows on the marble floor, as if the house itself had grown tense. Emma's breathing quickened. Her heart thudded so loudly she feared everyone could hear it. She felt every gaze pressing into her, the wealthy guests leaning forward, eager to feast on the scandal unfolding before them. Her mother's hands shook, clutching the hem of her apron so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Speak clearly," Sheikh Omar demanded, his voice deep and controlled, though his grip on the cane tightened as if bracing himself. "What do you mean by more to her bloodline?" The advisor swallowed hard. His face carried both fear and determination, as though he knew the weight of the truth he was about to release could shatter more than pride. He looked at Emma first, his eyes soft with pity before turning to Omar. "This girl," he paused again, drawing every breath of attention in the room, "is not only the maid's daughter. She is connected to your family, Sheikh." The hall erupted. Gasps, whispers, sharp intakes of breath. The sound was overwhelming. Some stood from their chairs in disbelief. One woman muttered, "Impossible." Another hissed, "How dare he say that?" Emma's mother broke down, shaking her head. Please don't," she whispered, but her plea was swallowed by the chaos. Omar raised his cane, striking it once against the floor. The thunderous sound silenced the hall. His eyes narrowed at his advisor. "Explain," he ordered, his voice a command no one dared resist. The advisor bowed his head slightly before speaking again. "Years ago, before your wealth grew to what it is now, before this mansion was filled with so many guests, there was a time when you were still searching for stability. During those years, you entrusted many things to loyal workers, including Emma's mother." His voice trembled slightly. "And during that time, secrets were buried, secrets that should not have been forgotten. Sheikh, Emma's father was not a stranger. He was someone from your bloodline." The words struck like lightning. Emma's legs weakened, and she grabbed the edge of the table near her to steady herself. She looked at her mother, eyes wide, but her mother could not meet her gaze. Tears streamed silently down the older woman's face, her silence confirming what the advisor had just said. Omar's voice grew heavier, darker. "You mean to tell me that this child, this girl I was ready to dismiss as the maid's daughter, carries my family's blood?" The advisor nodded solemnly. "Yes." A storm brewed inside the hall. The guests began to whisper again, this time in sharper tones. Some were shocked, others disgusted. One businessman scoffed bitterly. "So this is the drama we are witnessing? That a servant's child claims to share blood with royalty?" Emma's chest tightened. She wanted to speak, to defend her mother, to deny or confirm, but words refused to form. Her entire life, she had thought of herself as the daughter of a humble maid. Now, in front of strangers, she was told she belonged to a lineage she never even dreamed of. Omar looked directly at her mother now, his gaze piercing. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice low, almost dangerous. Her mother's lips quivered. She clasped her hands together, her voice breaking as she spoke. "Yes, it is true. I kept it hidden to protect her, to protect you, to protect everything." The confession hit Emma harder than anything else. "Mother, you knew?" she whispered, her voice trembling with betrayal. Her mother turned toward her, her face drenched in tears. "I wanted you to live free from the weight of his name," she said softly. "I wanted you to be safe." The guests were restless now. Some sneered, whispering cruel things about Emma and her mother. "Disgraceful," one said. "Imagine hiding a child like that." Another muttered, "This changes everything." But Omar silenced them with a glare. "Enough." His voice thundered, cutting through the noise. He rose from his chair, standing tall despite his age, his presence commanding absolute attention. He walked closer to Emma, his cane tapping with every step, until he stood just before her. Emma's body trembled, but she held his gaze. Omar's eyes searched hers, as though trying to find traces of truth within her. After a long pause, he spoke, his voice quieter now. "If what has been said is true, then you are not just a servant's daughter. You are my blood, but words are cheap. Proof must speak." He turned to his advisor. "Bring what is needed. We will not rest until the truth is certain." The advisor bowed and left the room, leaving an unsettling silence behind. The guests shifted uneasily, some excited at the prospect of scandal, others horrified at what this revelation could mean. Emma looked at her mother, her eyes burning with confusion. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered again, this time louder, more desperate. Her mother stepped forward, finally daring to hold her daughter's hands. "Because, Emma," she said, her voice filled with sorrow, "the world is crueler than you think. If people knew the truth, they would use it to hurt you. I thought by keeping it hidden, I was protecting you from their judgment, from their greed. I wanted you to have a simple life, one without heavy expectations. But you gave me a lie instead," Emma said, her words cutting through the silence like glass. Tears filled her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "All these years, I never knew who I truly was." Omar watched silently, his expression unreadable. His hand tightened around his cane, but his mind wandered elsewhere, to memories long buried, to choices made in silence. He did not speak, but those close enough to see him noticed something flicker in his eyes. Regret. The tension stretched until the advisor returned, carrying a sealed envelope and a thin box. He placed them on the table before Omar, who nodded gravely. "Inside lies the truth of her bloodline," the advisor said. Emma's heart raced as Omar slowly opened the envelope. Inside were old documents, faded photographs, and letters. He pulled one letter free, unfolding it carefully. His eyes scanned the words, and for the first time that evening, his hands trembled. He read aloud in a heavy voice, "To Omar, I write to you knowing the truth cannot remain buried forever. The child born to her is not merely hers. She is also yours to protect." The words hung in the air like fire. Emma's entire body went cold. Her mother broke down completely, sobbing uncontrollably. The guests gasped louder than ever. Some stood in shock. Others covered their mouths. Omar folded the letter back, his eyes fixed on Emma. For the first time, his sternness broke, replaced with a deep, painful recognition. He whispered almost too softly to hear, "You are my granddaughter." The hall exploded in chaos. Gasps, shouts, arguments. The noise was unbearable. Some refused to believe it, calling it a trick. Others bowed their heads, too stunned to speak. Emma stood frozen, the word granddaughter ringing in her ears. Her whole life had changed in one moment, but just as the uproar reached its peak, another unexpected twist struck. A tall man in the corner, silent until now, finally stepped forward. His face was shadowed, his expression unreadable. "Sheikh," he said, his voice calm but heavy, "before you embrace her as your blood, you must know this truth is not complete. There is more about this girl than even you realize." The hall froze again. Emma's knees weakened, but she refused to collapse. Her mother's eyes widened with new fear. Omar gripped his cane tighter, staring at the man. "What else?" he demanded. The man stepped closer, his eyes locking on Emma. "Her story has only begun. What you think you know now is only half the truth." The room held its breath, waiting for what would come next. The tall man's voice carried a weight that silenced even the whispers. His presence had gone unnoticed until now, though he had been standing at the far end of the hall all along, like a shadow waiting for its moment. He walked forward with measured steps, the sound of his shoes echoing in the marble hall. The guest's eyes followed him, nervous and curious, while Emma's heart pounded harder with every step he took toward her. Her mother clutched her apron, whispering Emma's name like a prayer, Omar's sharp gaze fixed on the man. "Who are you to speak in my hall with such confidence?" he asked, his voice firm, demanding. The man bowed his head slightly. "Forgive my intrusion, Sheikh. My name is Daniel. For years, I have worked quietly within your estate, ensuring your business records, your archives, your history remain intact. You may not notice men like me, but we notice everything. And I cannot stay silent tonight." Omar narrowed his eyes. "And what is it you claim to know about this girl, my blood, that has not already been revealed?" Daniel looked directly at Emma, his expression softer now, though filled with tension. "She is indeed your granddaughter, Sheikh. That much is true. But she carries more than your bloodline. She carries a truth that could change everything you believe about this family. A truth that, if left buried, could one day destroy her." The guests leaned forward, their curiosity rising higher than their fear. Emma's knees trembled beneath her, but she refused to fall. "What truth?" she asked, her voice small but steady. Daniel hesitated, as though measuring every word. "Your father, the man you never knew, the man hidden in silence. He did not leave you by choice. He was cast away, forced into shadows, because the truth of his own birth was never meant to see the light. And you, Emma, carry that secret in your blood." Gasps filled the hall again. Omar's cane struck the floor sharply. "You dare suggest that my son's birth was hidden?" he demanded. His face darkened with anger, but beneath it his eyes glistened with something deeper, fear. Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes, Sheikh. You know it in your heart. You always suspected something was wrong, but pride kept you silent. Your son was not only your heir, he was connected to a story even larger than your own. And Emma, she is the living proof of that connection." Emma's voice broke through the silence. "Are you saying I don't just belong here, but to something even bigger?" Daniel met her eyes. "Yes, your father was more than a son hidden in silence. He was part of a legacy that others feared, a legacy people wanted to erase. And now, through you, it returns." The room erupted in fresh chaos. Guests argued, some dismissing Daniel as a liar, others whispering with fascination. One businessman laughed bitterly. "First she is the maid's daughter, then the sheikh's granddaughter, now the heir to some hidden legacy. How convenient." Another sneered, "Stories like this belong in fairy tales, not in this hall." But Omar silenced them again with a single glance. He turned back to Daniel. "If what you say is true, then prove it. Bring evidence, not words." Daniel reached into his coat and pulled out a small, leather-bound journal, worn and fragile. He placed it gently on the table in front of Omar. "This belonged to your son, Emma's father. I found it years ago, hidden among old records. I kept it safe, waiting for the day the truth would matter." The hall held its breath as Omar slowly opened the journal. The pages were filled with handwritten notes, sketches, letters. His eyes scanned the words, and his hands trembled more visibly now. He read passages aloud, memories of love, of struggle, of betrayal, words written in pain, in fear. Then one passage caught his breath. "They will never let the truth of who I am be known. They will silence me, erase me, and all I hold dear. But if my child ever reads these words, know this: you are not just of my blood, you are of something greater. Something worth protecting." Emma's chest tightened, as if the words were written directly to her. Her mother sobbed quietly, her face hidden in her hands. The guests sat stunned, speechless. Omar closed the journal slowly, his eyes burning with a storm of emotions. "Why was this hidden from me?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Why was my own son's voice buried in silence?" Daniel lowered his head. "Because, Sheikh, those who feared him were close to you. They stood beside you, pretended loyalty, but worked against him. They wanted your power, your wealth, and they knew that if his truth was known, their hold over you would crumble." The revelation struck like another blade. Omar's gaze swept across the hall, searching the faces of his guests, his so-called allies. Some looked away in shame, others in fear. The weight of betrayal pressed heavily on him, but deeper still was the pain of realizing his own blindness. Emma's voice trembled as she asked, "So, all this time my father wasn't weak or careless. He was silenced?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, and now you carry the burden of his silence, but you also carry the strength he left behind. His story lives in you." The hall felt suffocating. Emma's mind raced with too many truths at once, her identity shifting again and again until she felt like she no longer recognized herself. She wanted to cry, scream, demand answers, but she stood frozen, her voice lost in the storm of revelations. Her mother finally stepped forward, her voice breaking. "Emma, I never told you because I wanted to protect you. Your father wanted you safe, hidden from the cruelty of those who stole his place. If the world knew who you were, you would have been torn apart." She clutched Emma's hands tightly. "I chose silence over risk. Perhaps I was wrong, but I only wanted to save you." Emma looked at her mother, torn between love and betrayal. "But you saved me by stealing the truth. How am I supposed to live when I don't even know who I am anymore?" The room grew quiet again, the guests waiting breathlessly for Omar's response. He stood motionless, gripping his cane, as though it was the only thing holding him upright. His eyes locked on Emma, but his face revealed nothing. No anger, no acceptance, only deep conflict. Then suddenly he turned sharply toward the guests. His voice boomed through the hall. "Enough of your whispers, your doubts, your greed. Tonight is no longer about wealth or pride. Tonight is about truth. And if this girl is indeed my granddaughter, the heir of my blood, and of a legacy far greater than my own, then it is not you who will decide her worth. It is she who must decide what to do with the truth she carries." The guests fell silent. Emma's breath caught in her throat. For the first time, Omar's words placed the weight of choice in her hands, but before Emma could even process what this meant, another twist shattered the fragile silence. A woman's voice, sharp and trembling with emotion, called from the entrance of the hall. "She is not the only one who carries this blood." All heads turned. A figure stood in the doorway, a woman cloaked in black, her face partially hidden, but her eyes blazing with determination. The guests gasped in shock. Emma's body went cold, her mind spinning. Omar's voice dropped into a growl. "Who are you?" The woman stepped forward, her words cutting like fire. "The truth you are discovering tonight is only the beginning. For years you have lived in lies, and I'm here to reveal the rest." The hall plunged into chaos once more, the weight of yet another revelation pressing on everyone's chest. Emma gripped the edge of the table, her entire world tilting further into uncertainty, as though the ground beneath her was no longer solid. And Omar, for all his power, stood frozen, knowing that the storm of truth was only beginning. The hall had grown strangely quiet after Emma's answer, but that silence now deepened into something else, an uneasy tension that no one could name. Sheikh Omar did not look away from her, and his eyes seemed to carry more than just curiosity. They carried recognition. It was as if the words she had spoken had awoken something old inside him, some piece of the past he had tried for too long to bury. Emma shifted uncomfortably in her chair, glancing at her mother, who shook her head slightly, silently begging her not to say anything more. But the sheikh leaned forward on his cane, his deep voice breaking through the stillness. "You spoke my grandfather's words with care," he said. "That is not something one learns in books. That is something one inherits." The guests stirred. Murmurs rose again, this time tinged with speculation. One of the men whispered to his wife, "Why does he speak like that to her? She's just a maid's child." The woman frowned. "Or maybe not," she muttered, eyes narrowing at Emma. The whispers grew louder until Omar struck the cane against the floor, silencing everyone. His gaze swept over the faces in the hall, faces filled with wealth and pride, yet none of them could meet his eyes. Then turning back to Emma, he asked, "Child, do you know the story of your family?" Emma hesitated, confusion flashing across her face. "No," she admitted softly. "I only know what my mother told me, that we came here for a better life." Omar's lips pressed into a thin line, and for the first time there was a hint of pain in his expression. "And what if I told you," he said slowly, "that your bloodline carries something greater than even these men standing before me?" Gasps filled the room. Emma's mother Maria stood abruptly, her hands trembling. "Please, sir," she said, her voice shaking, "do not put ideas into her head. She is just a girl." But Omar's eyes narrowed at her, and he raised a hand to stop her words. "No, Maria," he said firmly. "It is time she knows the truth." The hall felt charged, as though a storm were gathering inside its walls. The wealthy men shifted uncomfortably, some of them glaring at Emma, as though she was suddenly a threat to their place, while others looked at Omar with unease, sensing that the old man was about to uncover something long hidden. Emma's heart pounded. She looked at her mother, who seemed torn between fear and grief, her lips pressed tightly together, as if trying to hold back a flood of secrets. Finally, Omar spoke again, but this time his voice carried the weight of memory. "Years ago," he began, "there was a man of honor who left his homeland under the weight of betrayal. He built a new life here, far from the desert and the sands that had once known his footsteps." "That man was your grandfather," the room erupted. Voices rose in shock. "Her grandfather," one of the wives exclaimed. "That's impossible," another hissed. She stopped herself when Omar's eyes turned sharply to her, silencing her instantly. Emma's breath caught. She turned to her mother, who had tears streaming down her cheeks. Maria shook her head, whispering, "I wanted to protect you. I never wanted you to bear the weight of his name." Emma's mind spun. Grandfather? A man of honor, betrayal? Questions piled up, and she could hardly breathe under the weight of them. Omar, however, did not let her speak yet. Instead, he straightened, his cane steady, and declared, "That blood flows in you, Emma, that voice you carry us, that is his gift. And that is why, when I spoke in Arabic tonight, you were the only one who could answer." The guests looked on, their disbelief battling against the truth that seemed to stand so plainly in front of them. Some of the men clenched their jaws, clearly displeased. One of them, a tall man with a sharp suit and an even sharper tongue, muttered loud enough for others to hear, "This is nonsense. She is nothing but a servant's child. No bloodline can change that." His words dripped with scorn. But Omar turned his gaze on him, and the man instantly fell silent, his arrogance crumbling under the Sheikh's authority. But Omar was not done. He turned to Maria, his voice quieter now, though no less commanding. "You hid this from her all these years. Why?" Maria's voice cracked as she answered, "Because I wanted her to grow without pride, without enemies. I wanted her to know kindness before she knew burden." Her words pierced Emma's heart. She had always wondered why her mother avoided speaking about family, why every question about the past ended in silence or in quick changes of subject. Now it all made sense. The truth was heavy, but at the same time, it explained why she had always felt different, why her mother had insisted on teaching her words that seemed almost sacred. Emma's eyes stung with tears, but she blinked them back, forcing herself to stay strong. She lifted her head and looked at Omar directly. "If what you say is true," she asked softly, "then why now? Why tell me in front of all these people?" The Sheikh's expression grew unreadable. He rested both hands on his cane and spoke with careful precision. "Because," he said, "a test is not only for you. It is for them as well." He gestured toward the wealthy men and their families who stiffened under his gaze. Tonight they were silent. Tonight they revealed the emptiness of their pride. But you, the one they least expected, you carried the voice of honor. They must see it. They must never forget it. The room bristled with discomfort. The businessmen looked outraged but dared not speak. Their wives exchanged nervous glances. Emma, however, felt her chest tighten with a mix of fear and resolve. She did not fully understand the meaning of what had just been revealed, but she knew it was only the beginning. Her mother reached for her hand, squeezing it tightly, as if silently begging her not to step into this dangerous light. But Omar's eyes never left Emma's face. "The question now," he said slowly, "is whether you will accept what is already yours." The air grew so heavy that it seemed no one dared breathe. Emma's mind was a storm, Her life, simple and small just a few hours ago, now felt like a thread pulling her towards something vast, something she could not yet see. She wanted to speak, to ask more, but fear tangled her words. All she could do was sit, trembling, as the eyes of the entire room bore down on her. And just then, as if fate itself wanted to add another layer to the night, a voice from among the guests spoke up. It was a woman's voice, sharp and cold. If she is who you claim, then she is also tied to everything her grandfather left unfinished. Do you really want that responsibility to fall on a child? The hall turned toward the speaker, and Emma's blood ran cold. She did not know the woman, but Omar's eyes darkened, his grip on the cane tightening. He knew her, he recognized her, and from the way his face hardened, it was clear that her words carried a shadow from the past, a shadow that was about to rise again and pull Emma even deeper into a truth she had never asked for. The woman's voice sliced through the silence like a blade, each syllable carrying poison. She stood from her place at the long table, her gown shimmering under the chandelier's glow, and the room seemed to lean in closer. Emma had never seen her before, but there was something unsettling about the way she carried herself, sharp, poised, and with eyes that pierced straight through her. Omar's expression shifted from stern authority to something darker, almost pained, as though he was staring at a ghost he thought he'd never see again. Her name was Layla, and unlike the others in the hall, she was not surprised by Emma's answer. She smirked, her words rolling off her tongue with calculated cruelty. "So the blood does live on after all," she said slowly. "But if she is truly her grandfather's child, then let us not forget the debts he left behind. Debts that cannot be erased by a girl repeating a few words of Arabic." Emma felt her chest tighten, her eyes darting to her mother, who now looked utterly broken, as though she had feared this exact moment all her life. Maria whispered under her breath, "Why is she here?" But the question carried no answer, only dread. Omar tapped his cane once hard against the marble floor, and his deep voice thundered. "Layla, you have no place speaking of things you do not understand." Layla laughed softly, a laugh that echoed through the vast hall, making everyone uneasy. "Oh, I understand more than you think, Sheikh," she replied. "I remember the promises her grandfather made, promises to families who trusted him, promises of wealth, honor, and land. And then he disappeared, leaving nothing but ruin behind. Do you really think people have forgotten?" Gasps spread across the hall. The businessmen exchanged uneasy looks. Emma's heart raced, confusion pounding in her skull. What promises? What debts? What kind of man had her grandfather been? She had only just learned of his existence, and now the shadow of his mistakes hung over her like a storm. Her hands trembled, but she clenched them into fists, forcing herself not to shrink under the weight of the woman's words. Omar's jaw tightened. His knuckles whitened as he gripped his cane, but his voice remained steady. "You speak of the past with venom, Layla, but you forget why he left. You forget the betrayal that drove him away. Do not twist truth into poison for the sake of your bitterness." Layla's smile widened, but her eyes flashed with malice. "Oh, betrayal," she said mockingly. "Or was it simply cowardice? A man too weak to face the fire he started? And now look, his granddaughter sits here unaware yet bound to the same shame. Will you pass his burdens to her as well, Sheikh? Is that your lesson tonight?" Emma felt her stomach churn. Shame, burden, words she had never associated with herself before. Her mother's face was pale, her lips pressed tight to stop herself from crying out. And Emma realized with a sinking heart that her mother knew. She knew everything, the debts, the betrayal, the shame. She had kept it hidden all these years, not to protect Emma from danger, but to protect her from the truth. But Omar was not one to back down. His voice rose again, steady as a storm. "The sins of a man are not inherited by his blood. And if you think you can shame her into silence, you are mistaken. This child carries the strength of her grandfather, yes, but also the chance to restore what was broken." The room erupted into whispers, the kind that bite and claw at reputations. Some of the men nodded, as if agreeing that perhaps debts could be repaid. Others shook their heads, muttering that the girl was nothing but trouble. Emma sat frozen in her chair, caught between two truths: the honor Omar spoke of, and the shame Layla hurled at her. Finally, unable to hold her silence, Emma spoke. Her voice trembled at first, but grew stronger with every word. "If my grandfather left debts, then why must I pay for them? If he made mistakes, why should I carry his shame?" Her words silenced the hall again, and every eye turned toward her. "I didn't choose my blood. I didn't choose his decisions. So why should I be punished for them?" For a moment, even Layla faltered. The girl's voice carried not just innocence, but a raw strength that even the wealthy wives and arrogant men had not expected. Omar's face softened, a flicker of pride in his eyes. Maria, though fearful, squeezed her daughter's hand tightly, whispering, "That's my Emma." But Layla recovered quickly, her eyes narrowing. "You speak bravely for a child," she said coldly. "But bravery does not erase history. If you truly believe you are innocent of his debts, then prove it. Show us all that you can stand where he could not." Her challenge hung in the air like a dagger. Omar's gaze darkened. "Enough," he growled. "This is not a game." But Emma, surprising even herself, stood from her chair. Her legs trembled, her palms sweaty, but her voice was steady. "Fine," she said, her eyes meeting Layla's without flinching. "If you want me to prove it, then I will. I don't know who my grandfather was. I don't know what he promised or what he failed. But if I have to face it, I will. Not for him, not for you, for myself. Because I don't want to live in the shadow of secrets anymore." The hall gasped. Maria's face paled further, her body trembling as though the ground beneath her had cracked open. Omar's eyes widened slightly, then softened again, filled with a mixture of sorrow and admiration. Layla only smirked, as though the girl had walked right into her trap. The air grew tense again, so heavy that it pressed on everyone's chest. Omar broke the silence. "Emma, be careful," he warned. "You do not know the depth of the path you are stepping onto." Emma turned to him, her eyes bright with tears, but blazing with determination. "Maybe not," she admitted, "but I know the depth of silence. And I'm tired of it." Her words struck something in everyone present. Even those who had doubted her now shifted uncomfortably in their seats, realizing that this girl, young and unprepared, carried a fire that none of them had expected. Omar exhaled deeply, almost as if releasing years of grief, and whispered under his breath, "So it begins again." Layla's smirk grew wider. "Good," she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "Then let her carry the weight. Let her walk into what her grandfather abandoned. We shall see if she is truly of his blood, or if she will crumble just the same." Emma's heart pounded, her throat dry, but she stood firm. For the first time in her life, she was no longer just the maid's daughter. She was something more, though whether it would bring honor or ruin, she could not yet tell. The hall seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the storm to break. And as Omar looked at her, his voice low and heavy with warning, he said, "The past has a way of finding us, Emma, and it never comes alone." The air inside the mansion felt suffocating, every chandelier light glaring down as though exposing hidden truths no one wanted to face. Emma stood there, trembling but unshaken, the weight of her grandfather's shadow pressing against her chest. Omar looked at her with a mixture of pride and sorrow, while Layla's cruel smirk never faltered, as though she had already won. The wealthy guests whispered, their words sharp with judgment. "She'll never endure this," one muttered. "She's just a maid's child," another scoffed. Yet none could deny that something powerful had shifted. Emma had spoken with more courage than any of them. And then the twist came. From the far end of the hall, a frail old man dressed in plain clothes slowly stepped forward. His face was weathered, his beard gray, and his back bent with years of burden. Nobody recognized him at first, until Omar's cane clattered to the marble floor. His lips parted in disbelief. It cannot be," Omar whispered. The hall turned to see Omar's usually unshakable expression break into pure shock. "You..." Emma's heart nearly stopped. The man looked directly at her, his tired eyes softening, and for a moment it was as though time froze. Layla's face drained of color. "No," she hissed, backing away. "This is impossible." You were gone." The whispers grew louder, rippling through the hall like a wave. Some gasped, others pressed hands to their mouths in disbelief. And then the truth broke free like a thunderclap. It was Emma's grandfather, alive. Maria collapsed into tears, burying her face in her hands. Omar stepped forward, trembling for the first time in decades. "You vanished. They said you were dead. They said you abandoned us all." The old man raised his hand, his voice hoarse but steady. "No, Omar, I never abandoned anyone. I was betrayed. I was silenced. They buried me in exile, and I thought I would never see home again." He turned to Emma, his eyes brimming with tears. "And now, here she is, my blood, my voice." The room erupted into chaos. The wealthy men argued, some shouting that this changed nothing. The debts were still owed. Layla shrieked in fury, her mask of control shattering as her schemes fell apart. But in the middle of it all, Emma walked toward her grandfather. Her steps were slow, her breath uneven, but her heart pulled her closer. She stopped only when she stood face to face with him. "You're real," she whispered, her voice breaking. "All this time, you were real." He nodded, his wrinkled hands trembling as he reached for her. "And you, my child, are my redemption. They thought the bloodline was broken. But you answered tonight. You spoke when all others stayed silent. And that is more powerful than gold, than debts, than betrayal." Layla tried to cut in, her voice sharp with desperation. "Do not be fooled. He speaks of honor, but he left ruin behind him. The debts still stand." But Omar silenced her with a thunderous strike of his cane. "Enough!" His voice roared through the hall. "I see the truth now. It was never about debts or promises. It was about envy. Layla, you and those like you clung to your pride while poisoning his name. And tonight this girl has shown more courage than all of you combined." The hall quieted. The truth had been revealed. The lies that had haunted Emma's family for decades collapsed under the weight of her courage and her grandfather's return. Emma looked around at the stunned faces, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. "You all judged me because of where I came from, because of who you thought I was. But tonight proves something. Honor doesn't come from money or titles or the weight of other people's mistakes. It comes from the choices we make ourselves. My mother taught me never to forget my roots. My grandfather taught me that silence is dangerous, and I choose to live in truth, no matter how heavy it is." The words struck the hall like lightning. The wealthy guests lowered their eyes, their pride stripped bare. Even Layla faltered, her venomous tongue silenced by the girl's unshakable resolve. Omar lifted his cane, his voice solemn yet proud. "Let this night be remembered," he declared, "that when the rich fell silent, it was the maid's daughter who spoke. And through her, honor was restored." Maria, still in tears, clutched Emma tightly, whispering, "You are stronger than I ever dreamed." Her grandfather smiled weakly, as though his heart could finally rest. The storm had broken. The lies had fallen, and in their place stood a truth that no one in that hall would ever forget. Moral lesson. True honor does not come from wealth, position, or the shadows of the past. It comes from the courage to speak when silence is easier, to stand when others bow, and to choose truth even when it hurts. A person's worth is not decided by the mistakes of their ancestors or the pride of others. It is shaped by the strength of their own heart.